Frisco, Colorado. Just 75 scenic miles west of Denver, lies in the heart of the majestic Colorado Rocky Mountains. At an elevation of 9,097 feet above sea level, Frisco is home to 2,700 permanent residents and is nestled within a 3-square-mile area between the Gore and 10 Mile ranges and adjacent to Dillon Reservoir. Long before the hustle and bustle of trappers and miners, stagecoaches and railroads, this region was populated by Native American tribes known as the Utes. Na-un-kara, the Ute expression for land where the Blue River rises, became the area we now call Frisco. The Utes were nomadic people who utilized this region from around 4800 BC to 1760 AD and followed bison herds up the Blue River drainage over what is now known as Hoosier Pass and down into present-day South Park. The many archaeological discoveries in the area include hearth charcoals, bone fragments, arrowheads, and ceramic and tool artifacts. The Utes were called Nuche'u, the people, or Yutas by the Spanish explorers, and mountain people by the Pueblans. Thought to be of Mongolian descent, the Utes speak different dialects of the Shoshonean language and were one of the first Native American tribes to acquire horses from the Spanish around 1680. Following a horse raid by the Utes in 1719, the governor of what was then the New Mexico Territory called in Spanish troops to retaliate. 800 soldiers and settlers were ordered to pursue the Utes through the mountains, which they did for over a month. However, after a debilitating encounter with poison ivy in the area that is now Summit County, the pursuers became sick and discouraged, not to mention extremely itchy, and gave up the chase. Occasional horse raids aside, Spanish expedition records from 1776 describe the Utes as generally friendly, even to the extent of providing early explorers with food. Ute tribes and Spanish settlers developed and used an efficient and fair trade system from the late 1600s into the 1700s. The Colorado Territory was established in 1861 following the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Colorado then became the 38th state of the Union in 1876, 100 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The territory's first military camp, Fort Garland, was established prior to statehood in 1852, and there soon followed a series of battles between Ute tribes and U.S. Army troops. The inevitable treaties were then signed with the tribes agreeing to settle in an area of land in western Colorado in the 1860s. On September 29, 1879, a tragic event occurred in northwestern Colorado, which came to be known as the Meeker Massacre. Nathan Meeker, a government Indian agent, had tried to force the Utes to become farmers, fencing off their land and plowing up prized horse racing pastures. The Utes retaliated by attacking the white settlers, killing Meeker and his men and taking some women hostage, an event which became a major turning point for the entire mountain Ute tribes. In 1880, a delegation of Ute Indians, led by Chief Ouray and his wife Chipeta, made the long journey to Washington, D.C. to sign yet another treaty. Chief Ouray died 7 months later of kidney failure at age 47. His wife Chipeta lived until 1924, to the then ripe old age of 81. Regardless of the numerous peace treaty efforts, cries of "the Utes must go" were heard from many of the newer residents of Colorado. And in 1881, the exodus began. The government first considered land near Grand Junction in the western part of the new state. However, protesters there objected, and the tribes were sent to barren reservation lands in Utah and southern Colorado. For almost 7,000 years, the Utes had lived on territory encompassing most of what is now Colorado and Utah, and parts of northern Arizona and New Mexico. As a result of treaty negotiations, their lands were quickly reduced to two relatively small areas, near southern Colorado and northeastern Utah. To date, the Utes remain the longest continuous occupants of the state. Following the expansion of U.S. territory in the early 1800s, the Louisiana Purchase not only opened the door for explorers such as Lieutenant Zebulon Pike and John C. Fremont, but also lured men from as far away as Canada for the lucrative enterprise of trapping and trading furs. Ute tribes were mostly friendly to and tolerant of the early settlers, trappers, and miners who began to migrate into Colorado in the mid-1800s. One such trapper, Ezekiel Williams, known as the father of the Santa Fe Trail, arrived in Colorado in 1811, leading 19 men on a fur trapping expedition. He had made his way into the Frisco area by 1812, but was soon captured by an unfriendly band of Arapaho Indians and kept captive along with 2 of his men for 2 years before finally escaping. The wetlands of Summit County were teeming with wildlife, and extensive beaver trapping took place in this area until around 1840. A site known as Lamonte's Hole, named after a Canadian trapper and located at the confluence of the Snake, 10 Mile, and Blue Rivers, now lies at the bottom of Dillon Reservoir. But in the 1840s, it was prime trapping grounds, abundant with beaver. Overtrapping led to an inevitable decline of beaver populations, and that, along with a diminishing demand for pelts, spelled an end to most trapping by the late 1840s. The Colorado Gold Rush began in earnest in 1859 with the discovery of the precious mineral in the Denver area. Frisco itself lay waiting for prospectors until 1873, when a Swedish stonemason named Henry Racine arrived, after making the journey from Kansas through Central City. Henry built a cabin on 10 Mile Island at the confluence of the 10 Mile Creeks. Others were attracted to the area, and the population had swelled to an estimated 100 people by the time Frisco was incorporated in 1879. Racine later brought over his wife and 2 brothers, and eventually his mother. His wife is thought to have been the first white woman in the 10 Mile Canyon. Henry and his family mined silver from the nearby Juneau lode in Frisco, and later went on to found the town of Racine in the upper 10 Mile Canyon, where they continued to mine. The mining boom virtually erupted statewide in the late 1870s, and the road over Loveland Pass was completed in 1879, bringing much-needed supplies to the fledgling mining camps and towns. Frisco was called the halfway stop, 32 miles to Georgetown and 32 miles to Leadville. 10 Mile Canyon, which now encompasses the stretch of I-70 between Frisco and Copper Mountain, yielded great prosperity from mining and logging operations. Thousands of miners lived within a 4-mile radius of the canyon during this time in small camps and town sites with such names as Curtin and Robeson. Total mine production from the 10 Mile Canyon area would eventually exceed $7 million, or approximately $178 million in today's dollars. The name Frisco came from government scout and railroad agent Captain Henry Learned, who represented the state of Colorado. He had been hired by rail company executives and stakeholders with interest to expand rail lines further into the west. In 1875, he attached a sign to Henry Racine's cabin declaring this area Frisco City. His intention may have been to attract a railroad line into the area, which was already a vital stagecoach stop serving the transportation needs of pioneers and miners. One capital stakeholder Learned represented was the St. Louis-San Francisco Railway Company, incorporated in 1876 and also known as the Frisco Line. The word Frisco, which by the way is not a nickname for San Francisco, California, is actually derived from a combination of letters associated with the St. Louis-San Francisco Railway Company, FR from Francisco, IS from St. Louis, and CO from Company. The Frisco Line, originating in Missouri, never made its way into Frisco, Colorado. It eventually ran south and ended up in Frisco, Texas instead. By 1883, 2 other railroad companies serviced Frisco, the Denver South Park and Pacific, and the Denver and Rio Grande. The expense of shipping ore by wagon developed an urgent demand for a railway system. The first narrow-gauge railroad to come through Frisco was the Denver and Rio Grande. This rail line operated from 1882 to 1912, gaining the best track rights on the west side of 10 Mile Creek and securing the best ore shipping contracts. The railroad company was one of the biggest employers next to mining. In 1883, the Denver South Park and Pacific, later known as the Colorado and Southern, was the second line to steam into Summit County and up through 10 Mile Canyon. Forced by the rival company, it developed tracks on the east side of the river on what is now the recreational bike path. The Denver, South Park, and Pacific Railroad had a good long run and operated until its tracks were removed in 1938. During Frisco's heyday, the town was bustling with people, and Main Street featured hotels, saloons, a school, post office, and a general store. Frisco even had a town hall where numerous social gatherings and dances were held. The schoolhouse was originally built as a saloon in 1899 by a 46-year-old miner, Oliver Swanson. It's unclear if the saloon ever opened as a drinking establishment or if Mr. Swanson went bankrupt before he had a chance to open to the public. In October 1901, the saloon was sold to Simon Schloss of Lake City, Colorado. In November of that year, the school district purchased the Swanson Saloon for $1,500 in order to accommodate the growing population of school-aged children. The present-day bell tower originated from a former Breckenridge schoolhouse and was added in 1910. The Frisco Schoolhouse operated as a school until 1963. The schoolhouse was placed on the National Register of Historic Places and opened as a museum in 1983. Over the next 15 to 20 years, in an effort to preserve more original historic structures, the historic park was developed. The Lanier Hotel, where Toscado's is today, was moved to Bill's Ranch and renamed the Ophir Lodge. Foot's Rest, the former post office and gas station, is still located on its original site and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Staley Rouse House also remains on its original footprint and is used today as commercial space. During the Great Depression and after the Silver Bust, railroad companies began to pull up tracks, and electricity service was cut off. In less than 20 years, Frisco's population dwindled from thousands to a scant 18 people in 1930. After the mining industry had dissolved, a local family, including matriarch Jane Thomas and her sons Bill and Walter, brainstormed a plan to attract residents and potential dairy customers to their ranch on the south edge of Frisco. This enterprising idea, to give away a few lots for free, eventually worked, and a happy community of Bill's Ranch was established. Though Walter died shortly afterward, the community continued to thrive. Bill eventually included a camp for boys. In his brochure, he promoted his dairy products with a phrase that stated, "Home cooking with an abundance of milk and cream." His sister Nellie served as nurse for the camp. Bill remained on the ranch, happily surrounded by his neighbors for many years until his death in 1952. He was a colorful character and is fondly remembered by many who visited Bill's Ranch over the years. His innovative vision and sense of community helped the town of Frisco survive some of the most desperate years in its history. In the 1960s, a new kind of gold rush arrived in Colorado, the White Gold Rush. As ski resorts developed over the years, the population grew, and Frisco remained a prosperous and exciting transportation stop, as was originally planned by its founders over 100 years earlier. From Native American hunting lands to the footsteps of explorers and trappers through the engineering advances of the mining and railroad industry, many historic tracks have been imprinted upon the Frisco area, creating an incredibly rich heritage. Frisco remains a hub of activity with recreational abundances and resources. Explore Frisco today and leave your own tracks of time in the land where the Blue River rises. Thank you for viewing this video and for taking a journey back in time with us. To learn more about other topics of Frisco history, be sure to explore the buildings in the historic park, featuring exhibits on Frisco's women, ski jumping, ranching, the construction of the Dillon Dam and Reservoir, the Memorial Tunnel, and the history of pioneer life. Also, be sure to explore other heritage attractions in Frisco, such as the Staley Rouse House on Main Street, the remnants of coke ovens on the recreation path, and the historic cemetery near the marina, by asking museum staff for more information.